everybody, Caleb here, and today I've got a really cool old guitar. This is a Martin D-35 from the early 1970s. It sounds really good. It's really enjoyable to play, except for the fact that it's really hard to play. The action is really high, and I don't know if you can tell, but there's not a whole lot of saddle left. So it's not very reassuring when it comes to that. There are a few other things about this guitar that I'm going to talk about, but I'll do that after I set it down. I'm going to go ahead and get it set down, and we're going to start tearing it apart and making sure what's wrong with it is what I think is wrong with it. So, here we go. So, as I start taking this apart, I'd like to talk about this a little bit. To most people, a vintage Martin like this is a highly collectible item. To the particular customer who owns this instrument, this is an instrument he likes to play. He did not buy it to be a high-value collector's item. He bought it to play it. So before we get any nasty comments about what I'm about to show you, I want to get that out of the way. So, to also preface, I'm sure you've heard that the heavier your neck is, the more sustain you will get out of an instrument. And I can say that is definitely true. If you have more weight, you'll have more mass, so you'll get more sustain out of it. Well, this particular customer had heard that and thought, maybe I can get a little more sustain out of my Martin if I put a little bit more weight on the headstock. So what he did was he started attaching some clamps to the headstock and playing it, which actually is fairly scientific, as in you can take a little bit off and put a little bit on. And he did this until he was happy with it. He weighed all the clamps, and then he made a weight, the same weight as all of the clamps, and attached it to the back of the headstock. So I know that's a little unorthodox, and I'm sure there's going to be some Martin purists out there who are unhappy with that. But I don't care. It's not a museum piece. It's not meant to be a high collector's item. This is meant to be an instrument this person enjoys playing. So why not let them do what they want with it? If this were virtually any guitar other than a Martin, no one would ever complain. So, anyways, that said, I don't have a problem with it. This is this person's guitar. Now that we're getting into the what's actually wrong with this, I've gotten the strings loose. I am fairly certain this is a neck angle issue. I'm going to put my straight edge on the fretboard, and as I run it down, I hit that bridge. I don't hit that bridge super high, but I do hit that bridge. So, I measured the string height before tuning this down, and I've got a little note card here so I have it marked up. The high E is at 145 thousandths of an inch. I'm aiming for 90. That's a fairly big jump. I think I said the high E. I meant the low E. The high E is at 100 thousandths of an inch. I'm aiming for 80 thousandths of an inch. It's not that big of a difference, but there's no saddle left on that end to take down. And seeing as this is a nice Martin guitar, this really needs to be done properly. I could probably get away with maybe shaving the bridge a little and taking the saddle down absolutely as low as I can go. But on a nice Martin guitar, that really isn't the right thing to do. So, I believe neck reset is in the future on this guitar. To aid that train of thought, particularly on the bass side, I almost wonder if the neck hasn't come slightly loose. Now, I know that guitars have this gap right here, but honestly, from Martin, it looks almost a little big, I was thinking. And I know it's a very small gap, and I know that guitars have them, but I wouldn't be too surprised if that wasn't, kind of indicative of this neck has come a little loose. And that's what could be causing my neck angle issues. So, because of that, and, because of the neck angle, I think I am safe to say that a neck reset is a reasonable route for this guitar. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the strings off of here. These strings could probably be replaced, so I'll probably just end up cutting them. It'll save me time. And I'll get us set up to do the next real step on pulling this neck. So I didn't exactly make this totally clear, but with no string tension, and when you run a straight edge on here, you really should float almost an 1/8 inch above the bridge. And nowhere does it really clear the bridge. It should be just under an 1/8 of an inch above the bridge. Somewhere in that area. So you can see here, we run right into that bridge. But I really want to be just under an 1/8 inch above. So I've definitely got to fix the angle on this neck. And if we do it right, then this should look really good. And, you almost not be able to tell I've done it, but it'll play better than most new guitars. So that's a good way to check to see what the issue is. The other thing that could be the issue, but I know it's not on this guitar because I've already checked it, is belly bulge. Oftentimes, the belly will pull up so much that the bridge is raised higher above where it started off, so the neck angle will then look like it's wrong, but it's really not the neck angle, it's the belly. This guitar is one of the flattest guitars of its age that I've ever seen. When you run your straight edge this way, by no means is it totally flat, but they usually aren't built in a way that they're going to be flat. But this is one of the flattest of this age that I've seen. It's looking like basically perfect. So that's not really pulled a belly into that at all. And I'm still having this issue. It's the neck angle. Now, if it were the belly, obviously we'd start working on the internals. Maybe a brace is broken or loose, or we have a warped bridge plate. But because none of that is an issue, we have no belly bulge, we know it's got to be at the neck angle. What I'm going to have to do is remove the neck. To do that, I'm going to have to loosen the fretboard extension. I'm going to have access to the dovetail that's underneath the fretboard extension, and we'll steam it and pull that neck out. So there's a few different orders of operations you could do when you're getting ready to remove a neck. You could go ahead and unstick the fretboard extension and then start working on the neck joint. What I think usually works best for me is to go ahead and drill the holes for the steam. That way everything is still solid and I know right where everything is, and then loosen the fretboard extension. So the neck joint itself is a dovetail that comes off of where the body joint is, which is usually at this 14th fret. If it's not the 14th, it's the 12th. So it starts here and it comes back in a dovetail fashion and ends right about the 15th fret. So because that's where the gap is, that's where we'll insert the steam so that we can steam that joint. So basically I'm going to have to pull this fret right after the body joint, drill 2 holes on each side of the joint, and insert the steam into there. So the goal now is to very, very carefully remove this fret. If I do it right, I can put this fret back in, and you'll never know that it was out. So there are a few ways to go about doing this. Sometimes a little bit of moisture helps. That can help soften up the wood to prevent some tear out. A lot of people say that that will swell the wood. However, if you notice the grain pattern, wood does not generally swell in that direction. Wood will swell in this direction along the grain, but not generally in this direction. So usually a little water can help soften that wood to help avoid some tear out. Heat is another option. I can heat this fret up a little bit, and that should help get out with less damage. The other thing would be that I've seen is to score each side of the fret very carefully. That way, when I do have tear out, it will stop at that score line. I think I'm going to go probably all of these options to some degree. I'll start by scoring that each side of those frets so I don't have any tear out beyond the fret. That way when it goes back in, all of the tear out will be hidden by the fret. I'm going to heat this up a little bit and get some water on it to soften that wood, and then we're going to try to very carefully pull that fret out without destroying it or the board. When you need very sharp tools, often a scalpel works very well. These are disposable scalpels, so I can just open up a brand new package and it will be very sharp. And I'm just going to run that along each side of that fret. I'm not pressing down super hard, but I am cutting the wood just enough that it'll stop any tears at that cut. So now I'm going to go ahead and wipe this down with some moisture just to make sure I get it. And what I'll do is I will get something, I'm not quite sure what yet, but something to heat this up a little, and then we'll try and pull it. So I've got my usual heating tool out. I figured it was just going to work best. I could have used like a soldering iron, but I'm going to need this here shortly anyway for unsticking the fretboard extension. So I figured I'd just go ahead and grab this. We're up to about 200 degrees on it. I'm just trying to heat that fret up evenly across it. Yeah, it's steaming that water away. So that's probably all it's really going to need. I'll set that aside. I've got a board to sit it on so it's not going to melt anything. And then I'm just taking these pliers. I have ground the ends of these a little bit so that they're more flush. And I'm just going to kind of wiggle that fret out of there. And try not to destroy it. So I'm not grabbing it super, super hard either, because I really don't want to destroy this fret. I'd really like to put it right back in when I'm done. There it is. I'm not sure I want to grab it. It might be close to 200 degrees. So, that came out very well. I don't have any big chips out into the area you'll be able to see. I really don't have any big chips. I'm very happy with that. So I'll set that to the side. So now comes the fun part, because I kind of have to eyeball this. I've got to try to hit the joint on the dovetail, and obviously I can't see that. So this is a little bit of a guessing game. A lot of a experienced guessing game. And you just gotta aim for, you know, where you think it's gonna be. This is the smallest bit I can use and still fit the nozzle on my steamer into the hole. The fret will cover up this hole plenty fine when we stick it back in there. Cool. You could probably see it just dropped. That means I hit the void. That's good. That means I've got a good hole there to be steaming into. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Perfect. Hit the void on that side as well. So I can now stick the nozzle on my steamer into that hole so we can get steam into that joint. Very good. Done with the drill. And now what we can actually do is start heating up this fretboard extension to unstick it from the top. So I started heating up the extension here, and I've been working on it a little bit. You can see I've got tape on both sides. That's to kind of help my tool not scratch up the finish. I'm just working it underneath there, and I'm sure I've said this 100 times already, but you don't want to pry on this. You work left to right to kind of work it in there. You don't want to go up and down because you're going to end up busting something you don't want to. I can tell when I start to get repetitive, so I'm not going to focus on this too much more. I'm just trying to get this unstuck all the way up to the neck. That way when I pull the neck, it comes out nice and easy. This is actually coming along fairly well. my heater is up to about 430 degrees right now, so that's going through and trying to soften that glue. This will take me a little while to get all the way done and make sure it's done clean, but it's not too terrible of a process, just working this fretboard extension loose. So I'll bring you back once I've made some progress, and we'll go from there. Well, this is coming off very well. I'm very happy with this. The last neck I pulled was on a older Yamaha, and we all know the Yamaha glue is virtually impervious to anything, but having this glue actually get soft has been, I would almost say it's been a nice treat. It's way better than the last one I had to do, but it's coming along fairly well. I'm going to get a little bit further along and then I'll come back and we'll see where we are then. I am fairly certain that fretboard extension is now loose. I can get all the way up to the end of the neck, or the end of the extension that is, all the way up to the neck, and it goes through. So we're looking good. I am going to go ahead and give this a minute to cool down because all those metal frets will hold all that heat for a little while. So it's going to cool down for just a little bit while I get ready to steam this neck out of there. So I've got the neck removal jig set up on this Martin. I've also got tons of paper towels laid out around where I'm about to be working. I have my steamer set up. This is just the nozzle. It is just like a regular inflator pump nozzle for like inflating basketballs and footballs and that sort of thing. And I'm just going to basically insert that into the hole I drilled earlier. And my steamer is still building up steam. Last time I reset a neck, I had 1 or 2 questions about what I'm using for steam. And I am using steam. What I'm using is a reused cleaning steamer. So you can use it for either steaming your clothes or like using it to clean floors and that sort of thing. It's got different attachments that attach to the handle. Basically, I've just modified one of them so that I can attach my insulated hose here to the handle and then attach the nozzle to the end. So I actually have a push button to release the steam. I am using steam, and a lot of people like to use dry heat for this because it's cleaner, and I agree with that, but I don't exactly have the... It's more expensive to build a tool like that than it is to reuse a tool you already have, so I'm not exactly set up to do something like that. So this is the route that I'm going. It works fine as long as you're careful. You don't want to over steam this because you can turn your finish milky. So you have to be careful, but it does work. I'm going to see actually if we have steam ready yet. Not quite, but we're getting close. I waited and waited and waited for the temperature to get up on the steamer, and if for some reason it wasn't putting out any steam, and then I took a B string and just kind of pushed it in there, and then there was built up back steam, so there was something in the way. But once I poked a little hole in there, it shot out a bunch of orange junk. Anyways, we're now in business, so I'm going to go ahead and stick this in the hole. And I'm going to start steaming that up. You can see it's steaming like crazy. I'm actually going to stop a second. Take it out. Clean it up. It's hot. Sure we're snug. See, my guess is that neck was actually loose, so it probably won't take much to get it moving. There's really not a whole lot of resistance on these. I'm kind of surprised. That one's getting stiff. That's good. I'm just running it in little spurts because I want to make sure this gets totally cleaned up and I don't make this huge old mess. I don't think it's running down from the top. I think it is seeping out the sides of the neck joint, which is good. We want that. That's very hot water, and it's on the bottom. I think it is coming out the bottom, which is also good. We want that. Just not too much of it. Those are getting awful stiff. Well, that's the first time I've ever had that happen. But that's it. It's out. I've got a little piece of wood from underneath the extension holding me on. I think I can probably very carefully press it down. That definitely had to have been loose. I can't see that coming off that quickly any other way. But cool. That's I don't know, it's probably as good as you can get one. I'm going to take as much of this stuff off of here and make sure it's as dry as I can get it fairly quickly. You really don't want to leave any moisture on the finish. You can see there's some glue there. This peeled up, but as it's wet, I think I might actually be able to just kind of clamp it down for a while, keep it flat. Just kind of put a block on here, keep it flat while it dries, and then I'll glue it back down once it's totally dry. But yeah, that's basically what I got to do now, is just wait for everything to dry. Right, came out great. No breaks. It must have come loose. It came out way too easy any other way. So I'm happy to see that. I'll let this dry up and then we'll come back and look at where we go from here. So this has had plenty of time to dry. You can probably actually see that it's dried up totally flat where this was starting to peel up. I'm going to try and glue those back down now. I may have a hard time getting them back up to get glue underneath of them. But we can use a little assistance. We'll squeeze some glue in there. I'm going to kind of pump it because usually that works at getting that glue back in there a little bit further. You kind of pump it, you know, up and down, up and down. I'm going to do the other one as well. It's looking very good. I'm going to put a piece of parchment paper down so I won't stick my block to it. And then I'm just going to put this block right back on there. Clamp it right back down. So I've been cleaning this up just a little bit, making sure everything's going to be nice and clean since I glued this back down. You know, there was a lot of leftover glue left on the inside here, so I've worked all that out. I've also cleaned up this side. It's looking really good, and what I thought I would check was, what does the angle look like now? And to get that back in there, I'm going to have to clamp that down. So I'm clamping that back into the joint, which, you know, I am fairly certain this neck came loose. The way it came out, and as I was looking at it, you know, the way the glue had settled, I am fairly certain this neck was not totally tight when I took it out, which is part of the problem with the neck angle. So that's pressed back in there, I think just about as far as it'll go. And what we'll do now is check the neck angle again. And it's already better than it was before we took it out. You can probably tell I'm actually clearing the bridge. I am not clearing the bridge by very much at all. You know, barely anything am I clearing that bridge by, but it does actually make it over the bridge. Before, it definitely ran into it, but now it clears it. It's not perfect, but it's already a lot better, which leads me closer to, I really think this neck came loose because the angle's not terrible if it was pushed in all the way, if it was right where it needed to be. But I think it's become loose, changed angle a little bit, and that was our problem. I am going to adjust it a little bit more to make it a little closer to perfect. I'm not sure I have enough clearance there yet. I'm going to clamp it down and make sure it's clamped down, and then check the angle and check the angle and check the angle. This is something you definitely want to get right, because it changes the playability so much. I did this in a way that it was easy to show you. I'm going to make sure I keep this clamped down because this could be coming up out of the pocket, but I'm going to do a lot of checking on this to make sure it's going to be good before I commit to anything. So I'm going to go ahead and keep working on that, getting an idea of what maybe needs to happen, making sure everything looks good, and I'll bring you back when I decide what I'm going to do and how I'm going to move on. So after a lot of measuring and making sure everything's nice and clean and everything was put in there, the neck angle isn't terrible. It's not good enough that I'm just going to glue it back in there. But when I got the neck pressed back in, it was actually better than before I took it out, which lends more to the idea that it was definitely loose or it had moved. And it's, as it is really not terrible. So rather than trying carving a bunch off, I'm going to go the sanding route, which is obviously would be a lot slower if you had to take a lot off. But I really don't need to take much off to get this where I want it to be. So what I've done is I've put some sandpaper on the front of this guitar, and I'm basically just, it's kind of hard to do with the table in the way, but I'll lean this over the edge, put my neck in here, and then kind of stress it like I want, take some off the bottom and not off the top, and then just work it up. And that way it stays even all the way across because it's meeting perfectly with the body. So I'm not taking off more in one spot than the other. It'll be perfectly shaped to the body when it's ready to go back in. And I'm just taking, a small amount off this way. All in all, for what this needs changed, which, isn't much, this probably won't take me any more time than it would for me to carve, because then I would have to sand it still to make sure everything was flat and perfectly lined up. This way I can guarantee it's perfectly lined up. Perfectly lined up meaning there's no gaps in here on either side, and it will go back in. So basically that's all I'm doing. I can see that I've started sanding, I can see the sanding marks on here. So that's good. You can actually see that the most sanding has been done down here, and the least has been done as we get higher up. It touches it less and less to the point in which all the way at the top it hasn't even touched. And that's exactly what we want. We want to take a little bit off of here and none off of here. That way this point has not changed. The fretboard has not moved forwards or backwards. We've just pivoted. That's the goal here. I have to lean this off the edge so I have room to stress that neck downwards. So I'll go ahead and get a little bit further along with this, and then I'll bring you back. It probably won't need much. I just want to make sure I get an even sand off of the back of that heel. And then, we'll bring you back when I'm ready to start looking at where we're at again. So I just took the clamp off of here. I kind of clamped it in there, and it's still pressed in there fairly well. And that looks really good. That looks basically right where I want it to be. So that didn't take me very long at all, and I've got a nice clean seam there. I'm very happy with that. The problem I think I'm going to have, is that dovetail is now loose. And it's not super loose, but it is loose. The way to fix that is to add some mass back to that dovetail. So what I'm going to need to do is make some shims for each side. Now the thing is, these are going to be super, super thin shims. But it is going to be the right thing to do on this so that this doesn't come loose again in the future. Is you want this to be as tight as you can at the bottom of the slot. This thing, because I took very, very, very little off, I've not made it super loose, but it is loose. So anyways, we're going to make some shims for in here. I'll end up making them out of mahogany. I'll get some stuff cut out to get started. I'll show you gluing them up at least, but I'll get some made and we will look at gluing those on there. So after looking through my wood collection, I found a piece of nice mahogany. This is, something I've used for some instrument. And I thinned it down to about as thin as I think I can reasonably get it. This isn't going to need much. I'm sure this will be more than I need. And I've got it marked up with pencil. Just cutting off length for one side. And then I will cut off length for the other side. Looks good. The next one there. So now we can glue those on to each side of that dovetail. And that will help tighten up that joint so that it won't ever, ever, ever move again. So we'll just put a little glue on there. Both sides. Make sure it's well spread. Good contact. Looks good. Do the same thing on this side. That ought to work pretty good. I put some wedges in there to kind of counter the angle so it kind of squares it back up. So I can use these clamps. Squeeze it on tight. That ought to work really good. We'll let that dry and we can work on shaping that down. So I got those shims glued on. You can probably tell now it doesn't go all the way in anymore. And that's good because that means it's very, very tight. And now I've started using the carbon paper to get a perfect fit. So as I go along here, you can see there's dark spots. And that is where it's making contact, and basically that means that's where it is stopping the neck from going in deeper. So I have to just carve those away. And as I get those carved away, it will go deeper and deeper into the neck pocket, into the dovetail joint, until I hit the bottom, and then it will fit as tight as I can get it to. So I carved away all of the dark spots on this side, or pretty close. There's still one spot I see right here. And then I'll do the same on the other side. Looking pretty good. Basically, I'll just wrap this back around here, the carbon paper, and put it back in the joint. Try to squeeze it as tight as I can get it. Wiggle it around. And I get some more spots on there. I may want a smaller chisel. You wouldn't necessarily have to use a chisel for this. I could use any other tools good for carving. I'm just using them because I had this one out, and that's what I'm working with right now. Sometimes it helps to just take a little bit of sandpaper and smooth out the surface. Once you've been doing this for a little bit, the whole thing can get a little dark or kind of the dusty from the carbon paper. So just a quick sand will smooth it out and then lighten it back up. It makes it easier to see the marks on the carbon paper when you stick it back in there. You don't want to take too much off because you could end up loosening it, but I'm a ways off yet, so just a little bit of sanding helps clean that back up so that it's easier to spot when I stick this back in there. So I've got this all carved down now. There really wasn't much of the shim left, you know, and of course there wouldn't be. I haven't moved it a whole terrible lot, but it's fitting in now and the angle's looking good. I'm ready to glue this thing up. So I'm going to start putting some glue on here. I'm going to do the whole thing all in one go, obviously, the extension and the dovetail. I'm doing this maybe a little bit differently than I've done it before recently. Now, I've done this the way I'm going to do this before, but it's been a little while. I've got a long straight board ready. I'm going to put across the fretboard, and then it'll run all the way down to the bridge so I can make sure the angle is good as this goes in. The angle is good. It's not like that I'm worried about it being bad. It's just extra insurance that it's going to hold right where it should. When you're working on an instrument like this, you really want to be sure everything is as perfect as you can get it. So a little extra insurance is not a bad thing. Want to make sure I get enough glue in the joint. Then I'm going to glue the neck as well, just to be ultra sure. Now, the other thing that there is to think about would be maybe putting a shim under the fretboard extension. I haven't changed the angle a whole lot compared to what it should be, compared to what it was after I stuck it back in shortly after taking it all the way out. So I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. On top of that, the fretboard extension frets on a guitar with no cutout aren't utilized very often. If this guitar had a cutout, you may want to worry a little bit more about getting them in line because someone might actually play them, but I don't know anybody who plays up that high on a guitar with no cutout. Okay, we got good glue coverage. Put my brush in my bowl of water. I'll put this in here. So now I'm going to put this board on here. This is a soft wood. It's probably pine. I've used it for pieces of things, here and there. It's also straight on this face and on the other face, opposite it. I have checked that, and that's something you want to make sure that it's actually straight. You're not working with too much of a bow. It's very straight. And I'm going to clamp this down. I'm actually going to go ahead and clamp this down up at the first fret first to kind of hold everything in place. I was going to put a slight shim under the back. The back of the bridge is actually higher than the front of the bridge where the saddle sits. So really sitting on that back of that bridge, that's about perfect if that's a straight line. So I'm glad to see that. Now I'll stick a clamp under the joint that we're actually working on. There's a piece of leather on the bottom. We'll start clamping that down. Now I've got a couple of wedges because that extension kind of bevels down at the end. You know, obviously this isn't making perfect contact with the fingerboard there, which that downward slope is very common. But I've got some wedges to put in there to help press that extension down. So that's looking really good. I've actually got quite a bit of squeeze out going on underneath the at the extension. So I'll try and clean up my brush here and use a wet brush to work most of that out. I say wet, it's just moist. It's not like dripping wet or anything. Take that out, work that glue off. I'm not too worried about that glue on the finish. Obviously I'd like to get it cleaned up, but wood glue doesn't stick to finish very well. Most glue doesn't stick to finish, like, at all. So it's not a huge worry. So it's looking really good. I got that clamped in there, nice and tight. These, I kind of tapped those wedges in there. Those will help hold that fretboard extension down. I think this is going to be really good. You know, because this is a straight board, I can see that the angle is going to look really good. It's sitting right perfect where I want it to be, where it hits where the saddle's going to be. Basically, I'm just going to let this set up now. This is going to take quite a few hours for me to be very sure it's perfectly set. So we'll let it go and come back to it after a while. So I've gone ahead and taken the board off of here. I've actually already put this fret back in, and it's sitting a little high right now, so I'm going to have to level these frets. This does not have an adjustable truss rod in it. I could see that when I pulled it out. It's just got the non-adjustable bar kind, so I don't have to worry about that very much. I did notice I was having the screws on the tuners were coming loose, so I'm just making sure they're tight. So I'm going to go ahead and start leveling these frets. I imagine it won't take me very long to knock that out. It usually doesn't. I've also actually gone ahead and put the old saddle back in here. This is bone. I'm going to try it out before I go making a brand new one, just to see where the height ends up. If this ends up being wrong, it's not going to take me too long to make a new one, but if this ends up usable, then I will have saved a lot of time, you know, that I don't need to spend. Because this is bone, I'm okay with reusing it. But first we got to level these frets. So here we go. That's not too bad. You can really feel where you hit high frets with this thing. And it's really feeling pretty good. So I'm not going to spend too much more time on that. I don't want to take off any more than I have to. I am going to go ahead and recrown these. And then we'll get to polishing them shortly after that. As I'm polishing these frets, I'm not really concerned with the board right now. I think I am going to clean it up. I can see there's a little bit of grime built up. And it takes me a whole lot less time to worry about the board. You know, I'm starting off with 600 sandpaper, so I sincerely doubt I'm going to cause any issues to the wood with 600 grit sandpaper. The 600 works really well for working off the any of the filing marks. It gets you really far on just it. After that, I'd take a 1200, do the same thing. Then I'll take my micro polishing pads and finish that off with those. So now to clean up the actual fretboard itself, and a lot of it's that old grime that was on there. I've got a brand new razor blade, and I'm just going to very quickly work my way across the fingerboard to knock off any of that old gunk. It really doesn't take much. And you just work across, that way you keep the radius in the board. So once you finish cleaning that fingerboard up, what you're going to want to do, or what I'm going to do at least, is oil it. And that's where it really starts to look good. I'm just shaking up my oil. I'm going to use some of this Be Good wood oil. I like this stuff. I just put a little bead on there. Working it with my fingers. Now, I wipe that off, that excess off, with a clean cloth. And it helps kind of, even everything out now. Nice rich color on there. That's looking really good. You can see there, that board's looking basically brand new. Nice high polished frets. And well oiled board. I think I'm ready to start setting this thing up. I'm going to make sure, look over everything, make sure I didn't forget anything. And then we should be ready to start actually setting this thing up and getting it playing. So I think we're ready to start setting this thing up. I did take this over to the buffing wheel and tried to polish this up. I don't know if it's because of the age or what it is, but I had a really hard time getting this to an even polish. I eventually got where I'm happy with it, but I had a hard time getting it there. So we're ready to start talking about strings. I've got some strings here. I'm going to start putting them on here. I'm going to look at the nut real quick. It doesn't look too bad. It looks pretty good actually. So I don't think that nut's going to need any extra help. I think we're ready to just put some strings on here and see where the action is. So it's up to tune. And I don't know for sure, but it's looking pretty good. At the 12th fret at least. The first fret wasn't really bad to start off with. This is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and check for sure now. That's 90 thousandths on the bass string. Like almost exactly, which is exactly what I was aiming for. What I usually aim for. That's what we got on the treble. A fair bit lower on the treble side. We're talking 75 thousandths. Maybe closer to 70 thousandths. The treble side is actually really low. The bass side is basically perfect for how I would set one of these up. Bare minimum. I may actually want to lower that bass side a hair and not even touch the treble side. I know this particular customer is not a heavy-handed player, so it may benefit him if I lowered it maybe just a little bit more. That first fret's looking good too. I don't think there's anything wrong with that nut. Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and just lower that bass side down by, 10 thousandths, 15 thousandths on the saddle. So then it's going to be 10 thousandths lower at the 12th fret here, which isn't much. And then I don't want to take anything off of this treble side. It's as low as I would want one to go. But that's really not bad, and I'm glad that old saddle works. It is a bone saddle, so I don't need to worry about, it's not like I would improve it tonally by replacing it. And it saved me time, saved the customer time, and me not having to make a new one. So that's really cool. I'm really happy with this. This is turning out really good. I don't think I'm going to film working on the saddle. I think I'm just going to go ahead and take care of it. It will go a lot faster if I don't have to film it. So I'll get it done, and then I'll bring you back here and we'll kind of look at it one more time. So I said I was going to take this back to the table and we were going to talk about it some more, and I did, and I talked about intonation, and there really wasn't a whole lot to show, and it ended up being way too long of a clip. So I think I'll probably just leave that out and we'll jump to here. It's set up really well. It's about 85 thousandths to about 75 thousandths of an inch. It's a little lower than 75 thousandths of an inch, but it's set up really well. It's really, really good. It's like a vintage Martin should be. So I'll go ahead and play it a little bit so you can hear how it sounds. I think this thing sounds really good. It's finally sounding and playing like an old Martin should. I'm sure the customer will be plenty happy with it. The action is set up, probably a little bit lower than some flat pickers would like, but seeing as this customer is more of a finger picker, I think he ought to like it real good. I hope you enjoyed this. Quite a bit of work on this Martin, pulling the neck and getting the angle back right. It was a little bit of an involved process, but really it wasn't too bad compared to some others. But it turned out pretty good, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.